If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Marsha, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 158 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. I hope you're ready for a classic conversation with one of the most famous house guests in the world. That's right, everyone. Kato Kaelin is here. Actor, podcaster, house guest, and witness at the trial of the century, the OJ murder case. We talk OJ, we're talking Ice Wars, we're talking 1 Degree of Scandalous, Kato's awesome podcast. We're talking People versus OJ Simpson. We're just talking. Kato and I have a fantabulous conversation, and that's coming up in just a few seconds. In these few seconds, I want to remind everyone to check out last week's episodes. Steve Young was my guest. He's a writer for David Letterman for over 20 years and the star and focus of the documentary Bathtubs Over Broadway, a documentary I am obsessed with, can't get enough. Industrial musicals, you don't know what that is? Listen to the episode, watch the documentary. You'll thank me later. It's amazing. Also, the bonus episodes on Thursdays with Crossing the Stream segments, binge watching TV suggestions for you. Don't miss out on that. But right now, without further ado, my conversation with Kato Kaelin, the world's most famous house guest, sat down with me. We talked OJ Simpson and oh so much more. It's a fabulous conversation. I'm excited to share it with you right now. Enjoy. All right, everyone, I'm so excited to introduce you to my next guest, actor, radio personality, podcast host, the most famous house guest in the world, witness in the trial of the century, the OJ murder case. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Kato Kaelin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. You said it just like a Jeopardy question. That was what's Kato Kaelin's real first name? It's Brian, not Brain.
Yes, Brian Kato Kaelin. So we've been following each other on Twitter forever. This is the first time we've had the opportunity to actually chat and meet. So very nice to meet you in person.
Good to meet you, Mr. Very funny man, by the way. I hope people see Jeff on stage someday. I cheated at YouTube, and some of your stuff is just brilliant. Nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. That is so kind. That is so kind. Thank you so much. Like everyone, I was fascinated with the whole OJ thing. So I got a million questions, but I want to kind of build up to that. I'd love to know what you, Kato Kaelin, what was your plan?
I'm a Midwest guy like you are. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just an hour different time zone than you. I grew up in the Midwest. I went to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, which is the second biggest university, and I was pretty good in baseball. So I made the varsity freshman year. I said, I think I could be a pro. So I transferred to Cal State Fullerton from there. But in the meantime, I was doing a TV show at Eau Claire called Kato and Friends. And I said, God, this is great. And you become instantly popular because you're seen all over the city. It was sort of my backup plan to see if I could become a pro. Anyways, I transferred to Cal State Fullerton, which was at that time the #1 baseball school. And when I transferred, I saw these guys that were enormous. We scrimmaged against Mark McGuire, who was at USC. That's sort of tells you my age. And I was nowhere near. I didn't develop whiskers till I was 38. So I saw I had no shot. Although I could throw a fastball 89 miles an hour and I had a knuckle curve, I didn't make it. And but I was doing theater, doing shows at Cal State in Wisconsin, and I said, God, I should just try to get into acting or in comedy. And sure enough, I auditioned for a movie a long time ago called Beach Fever. If you're ever on an aircraft carrier, I'm kidding. It was on USA Network. And I had that sort of beachy kind of guy. And at that time, guys like Johnny Depp were doing little beach films that I think Gary Marshall directed him. And I was getting those auditions. And so I've had my Screen Actors Guild card for over 40 years. And that was my goal, Jeff, is to get in acting. Always wanted to be an actor, always went to premieres. And a real quick story that I used to go to every film premiere and get invited, and no one made a big deal of it. But when I became famous from the OJ trial, everybody said, oh, look at, now he's going to film premieres, Kato. And it started a whole backlash. And I was going, no, I used to always do this. You guys just didn't know me. And then I always tell the story of when my career was kind of, I did a few national commercials for Jack in the Box, Coca-Cola, and Slice commercials. The week before the murders happened, the week before, I just tested for a film on my callbacks called Dumb and Dumber. And I was reading the Harry Lloyd part, Jeff Daniels role, and a few other roles. Jeff Montgomery was casting. And in the meantime, since then, I've met the Farrelly brothers and became, I've gone golfing with them. And it was sort of like, wow, it all came around. And it took over 30 years or 26 years before meeting it all. But it was like, geez, this is really interesting life. And I'm still the exact same guy, Jeff, still pursuing my career and still love people, even the ones that are haters.
You mentioned baseball. My friend Howard Rosner wanted me to mention that he loved you in basketball.
Well, basketball, David Zucker directed that and wrote it. And he's also from Milwaukee. And we have a very strong connection. As a matter of fact, I was just married less than a month ago. That was at David's house. He hosted the entire event. We didn't have basketball set up, but he's more than kind. And anything work comes up that he puts me in. And it's always great to have a connection, especially, as you know, Midwest people are just so down to earth.
Oh, yeah. And mazel tov on getting married. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Cheers. And mazel tov to you. I appreciate it very much. It's been great. Honey, where are you? Jesus, she's out shopping again.
Oh, man. For those of you just listening who know Kato and can picture him from the OJ trial, he's still got incredible hair. My hair was closer to your OJ era hair. Now I got a little receding. I hold on to hopes.
It's so funny that Johnny Depp just had a trial, and the first few days he had the Kato hair. It looked like he rented it mine from the 90s. And then they said, hey, Johnny, fix it up. Put it in a ponytail or something.
Isn't it amazing with the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, that there's still the fascination when a celebrity goes to trial? I mean, OJ was a murder trial, so there's a higher level of stakes there. But like this was just two people who were doing really bad things to each other that really none of us needed to know about.
Yeah, it was basically a dirty laundry trial. And you know what, Jeff? I always try to not get involved with the OJ stuff, but it's always I get a phone call to do an interview from anytime there's a trial or murder that goes on. They always call like, hey, what do you think of this? And I try to stay away from it. But yeah, inundated with Johnny Depp stuff. I said, you know what? I'm just going to post my own stuff and see what happens with that. And sure enough, you mentioned I have like yourself, a podcast, but it all was created because I was approached so many times like, Kato, you should have a podcast. And I never wanted to do it. And then I did the 1 Degree of Scandalous that you can get the podcast anywhere you guys get your podcast, Apple and Spotify. The guy that I worked with was at Fox Sports, really successful reporter in journalism. He runs Value Entertainment. His name's Tom Zenner. He said, this is what you need to do. So I did the first one, and I was like, felt so, it's sort of like this weight off your shoulder, and I could express myself, very cathartic. It got incredible that I discussed the Depp trial, and I'm discussing so many different, let's face it, everybody in America loves scandals. Everybody loves to find out that someone's life could be worse than theirs. And I think it's sort of that Homer Simpson, not OJ Simpson, the Homer Simpson theory, where people watch The Simpsons because Homer's always in trouble. And it's like, ooh, I'm glad I'm not him. Like I said, it's so cathartic to do a podcast and the guests and the scandals that we relive, current and old ones. And it's honestly, I'm not a promoter, but it really is fascinating. And I love doing it.
Well, it's great. And I think because you were part of one, a trial and all that, I think it adds a level of credibility that a lot of the true crime podcasts maybe don't have. And because just even being there yourself during the OJ trial gives you a perspective of things that happened, and you were aware of things tangentially that maybe no one else would have been just because you were there. You know how it works, so you bring a great point of view to that type of content. Plus, you're right. People just can't get enough of it.
Yeah, and they can't. And you know what? And I think people, like I said, they really want to see other people in pain. And I noticed that too. And you don't really, you become, I mentioned this on a few interviews, and it's so true. You become a soap opera character, and people have their judgment of loving you or hating you, and you no longer become a real person to anybody. And if you can get bashed by people, they don't really consider your feelings, and people ancillary to your life, from parents, husband, wives, kids, they don't care. I think I give that perspective of I'm very, very happy and a gregarious person, but sometimes you have to hide it when you're really hurting. And I think I did that, and now, like I said, it's such a release to do a podcast and get your feelings out there, and it just helps me out. I think I help others too.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, and it speaks to what you said earlier about people knocking you at premieres. People just want to take everyone down a notch, right? Oh, here's famous Kato. Look at him. He's just strutting himself. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
they only see the bad, and so it's because that makes them feel better. And it's like, come on, people.
Which is funny too. I know you do comedy, and I've been doing some stand-up. I do lots of hosting all over the country. I notice that when I do any kind of hosting, if I'm out of Los Angeles, the people are fantastic. The inner LA crowd, I just think there's a Kato stigma sometimes, and it's difficult. Or I always think maybe it's in my head. But if I get out of town, 25 miles out of LA, I can crush it, and it's really amazing because I think people like seeing someone out of LA. That they don't normally get to see. Not that I'm saying a celebrity, but I'm saying it's really refreshing to them and to myself to be out of Los Angeles doing anything, because people are so accepting.
Yeah, I think also probably the people in LA are like, why didn't I get that gig? And everyone else is just happy to see you.
People are, Jesus, why couldn't I? Does anybody here win the Heisman? Who's murdered someone? I want to live in that house. So like I said, why couldn't I have moved in with Jessica Simpson? Damn it, that Craigslist.
Hey, just want to take a quick break. Thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my amazing conversation with Kato Kaelin. We were about to dive into his Ice Wars project. And then don't worry, OJ Simpson's coming right up. And we're back. Oh, so much good stuff. Oh, yeah. Before we get into some other stuff, you sent me a clip, this new project you're doing called Ice Wars.
Oh, yeah, it is. So Ice Wars is basically prize fighting on ice, MMA fighting on ice. It's created by Charlie Nama, who's a dear friend of mine for many years, actually in Detroit, lives in Detroit and also in Florida. He played hockey. And Charlie said, God, everybody loves the fights at hockey. And they come for the fight. And he created ice fighting, no hockey game. It was so successful. May 21st, we did our first one in 2022. If people go to Ice Wars on Instagram or anything on Twitter, or even Kato_Kaelin, you'll see the comments. And Jeff, the comments are like, this is the brand new sport that we're falling in love with. We're on Fight TV, and they did the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fights. It's FITE TV, Fight TV. They are gung-ho on it. And it's so exciting that I'm on that ground floor and we see it growing. At one time, there was one UFC fight, and now it's like UFC, I don't know, the 3,000,012 right now. We are going to be in our second one. We also know that someone wants the third one, and we sell out. I mean, who couldn't love these guys? All NHL guys that used to play, and they know it's an art form to be on skates and fighting. It really is an art form. If anybody's gone skating before, you're from Detroit, and I know you know the Red Wings.
Absolutely.
It's really, really tough, and it's super exciting. Most of the guys I've met, they're all from Canada. I mean, we have some that are from the USA. The kindest people I've met in my life. These guys just go, well, I'm going to punch someone in the teeth, and I hope I win, and that's it. And then they hug. They go balls out. I mean, it's the real deal of fighting. So someone gets crowned king of the rink. AJ Galante is the president of the company. I don't know if you watched the Netflix show, Untold Crimes and Penalties. It's the #1 documentary on Netflix. AJ Galante and Jimmy Galante have the most incredible story. And that's how we also got formed there. AJ has a boxing rink. His father was compared to Tony Soprano. He bought his son at 17, his own hockey team. I implore people, please rent Netflix, Untold Crimes and Penalties. And that's another way that we started with Ice Wars. And like I said, all the right elements, the stars aligned.
That's really cool. And we do a weekly show live on Wednesdays. One of the guys on the show always talks about the Untold series. He covers every one of those.
Oh, cool.
There was one called Malice at the Palace where my friend Howard Rosner, actually, that I mentioned to you earlier, he was there working at the Palace when that whole huge fight between the Pistons and I'm not a sports guy, but I will say that Ice Wars, I think, will be huge because your description was the exact immediate visceral response that I had to you via Twitter DM when you sent me the clip. I was like, oh, this is perfect. It's hockey, and you removed the hockey and just left the best part, which is the fighting. That was, I'm not a sports guy, so it's like, but that's always awesome. And then I was explaining to my friends, I'm like, oh, Kato showed me this clip. It's basically like, it looks like MMA on skates.
Yeah. And we like I said, we crown someone king of the ring. And in Hollywood, I think, you're in showbiz, you go into any kind of pitch meeting. If you're going to pitch a TV show, you pitch anything, you try to get a deal. But when you can pitch a show in 10 seconds and someone goes, I get it, that's our show. They get it.
That's the first path to success, I think. Absolutely.
Yep.
So I had a question about the OJ trial. My first question actually is, how did it impact you internally, knowing, and this is like after, once you kind of got through the trial and you could probably relax and realize that with the fact that you were living with someone capable of murder and did murder. I have a story where like my roommate in college shot his girlfriend and killed himself. So it's interesting to me to kind of understand like where your head was. Because back then, a lot of people didn't go to therapy or anything, right? It wasn't like,
Right.
But there's a reality at some point after all this, after the whole media zoo passes down, you think to yourself, holy shit, I was like living with a murderer and I was at one point living with someone who was murdered. It's like, how did that play in your brain after everything kind of settled down?
I would say that to this day, I've had dreams, nightmares that constantly exactly you pinpoint it, that I say that exact thing to myself. It's like, my God, I was living with a murderer. And then it made me start thinking of when you are any person walking in the streets nowadays, made me wonder to myself, I wonder how many times you've actually bumped into somebody that has killed someone. As morbid as it sounds, it's like, especially in the nowadays where I think that life is not important to many people, and especially non-educated, without education, certain people don't view life as important. So I always think that thought. And then I was always thinking, it's like, what if things were sort of different, that somewhere I would, during that time, that I saw something and then he had to kill me. I mean, these are dreams that you go, Jesus, what if he had to also kill? So it's sort of like I get the queasy feeling to my stomach. Even today, I think that the trial itself, the pressure has, I definitely developed ulcers, and the stress was certain things in my stomach still pains today, because it was for me, I've never been in a courtroom my entire life until the OJ trial. I had no parking tickets, nothing. The first time I'm stepping in a courtroom, it's a double homicide trial. I never had to hire a lawyer and do all that, but I met some great people that I would, was advised, just get a lawyer so you can go through exactly the questioning that'll be happening, meet with both sides, the prosecution, defense. So it was a good year. It was a 1.5-year trial. And I was down at the courtroom for my testimony for 6 days, but down there for a month because I was on hold the whole time and just staying in a little like closet area waiting on hold.
Yeah, it's got to play with you, because I know I was kind of just digging a bit, but like when the murder happened, were you a suspect?
I
mean, right in the beginning. I mean, before they moved on, and obviously,
I imagine everybody has to be a suspect in the beginning to find out, because 5 a.m, someone's knocking at my door. It happens to be 4 detectives. I never even knew. I just let these guys in, and they didn't say anything. And then they finally said, "We're the detectives of LAPD." And I said, "Hey, what happened?" And the whole time I'm doing that, I'm saying, "Did OJ die? Did his plane crash?" Because that's the last thing I know. He went on a plane. And I was disorientated. I was like, what's going on? And then they came in my room and asked me everything. What clothes did I wear? What's going on? Are these your shoes? And I go, yeah, I wore this stuff. And they're looking under my boots and everything. I'm going, I have no idea what's going on. So I think as far as suspect, I'm sure that's where they're doing their job to find. They don't know me. And then OJ's daughter was in a bungalow next to mine, and then they woke her up. So yeah, I suppose everybody was. And then after being in the room and at the police station for pretty much, I think it was at least 12 hours or so, I think they interviewed me long enough, and then they let go, and it said we'll be in contact with you and that.
So they interrogated you pretty hard right after this.
Yeah, I was in a room, but it wasn't. I didn't think of it as hard. They just were asking me questions. They didn't. It wasn't a forensic files to me. It was just questioning, talking to me. I think they. The one thing that I always remembered, Jeff, is when I was being escorted out after being questioned at OJ's house, not my bungalow, but in the actual main house. They walked me out. They wanted everybody out of the house at one point. So they just said, I'm walking with detectives. They say, "Oh, watch out for the blood." And I looked down and I saw blood droplets. I was like, "Whoa!" And I always think in my head, watching many Columbos, I think that was just to see a reaction, maybe. But it was just like it shocked me that there were little droplets.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like they look for those little things. Like I was watching a documentary or something on the guy who did the Boston Marathon bomb,
Yeah.
and one of the they had all the crazy cameras going, and when the explosion happened, he looked the opposite way of everyone else, and that's how they knew that was him. And they, at least I'm going by whatever I was watching.
Yeah, no,
But it's a fascinating psychology, right?
So, I was going to ask you, you're talking about in college that you had, if you could, how did that affect you though? It's really interesting to me because talking with you, I didn't know something, that's sort of traumatic, that it was your roommate that shot his girlfriend and then himself. So two people were killed.
No, actually, she lived. So I was living with this guy, and this was like it was a room blind. I didn't know anyone really. It's a college I went to, and back nowadays, you meet people on Facebook groups, you get to know them for 6 months before you move it. Back then, I just got a letter that said you're living with this guy. Okay, so we're living together, and it was just he was a little off. Okay,
Right.
and so one time, my friend Tim was in my room, and he opens up the drawer, desk drawer, and I'm like, "Dude, that's not my desk." So he just shuts it. Okay. Later, we're back in the room, just to F with me. He opens the drawer again, just to get a reaction out of me. But there's a note in there. It said, "Do you like going through my stuff?" Okay. Insane.
Jesus.
There's no way. Okay. And so there's some level of weirdness going on here. And he would do weird stuff with his girlfriend on the phone, and he'd put like a show on. And it's like, I get it. Like when you're watching stuff, you never think point A is going to end at point Z, somebody getting shot or somebody getting killed. It's just,
Right.
It's not something that really goes through your head. And so one day he goes to Wisconsin, which is where his girlfriend was. And I think the story was, and again, this is just, secondary, but like that he was going to kill himself in front of her because she broke up, but she ran. So he shot her, hit her in the back of the neck. It kind of hit a soft spot in outer mouth. So she ends up being perfectly
Neck,
fine.
outer mouth.
Yeah, like that's, as I recall. And then they found him in a hotel. He had killed himself. And I'll tell you the other thing that happened to me is I had a lot of CDs at the time. Now I know people are like, CDs, what are CDs? But at one point, having 100 CDs, and this is the late 90s, that's where all my money went because I wasn't into drugs. So
Right.
It was odd to have that many CDs at this time. But my suite mate, so I had moved out. I have a new room. He robs me, takes all my stuff. That affected me a lot. I mean, there was 10, 15 years where I couldn't walk into a room without casing the room and really being worried. But the other guy killing himself, it was a little, because we didn't see it and it was a little surreal. Yeah. You felt weird. The girl was okay. But the thing I remember to this day is the parents coming to get their stuff and it not really emotionally impacting me huge until years later when I had kids, because I couldn't, putting that together with what they were actually going through. At the time, I had no context to that. And it was just them going to get the guy's stuff who was crazy and killed himself. You know what I mean? It was like, but years later, it was like, I was like, as a parent, I was like, oh, I was witnessing the worst moment of their lives. And it was like, whew, so.
If you don't get her on your show as a guest, can you get her on 1 Degree of Scandalous? Because that's really an amazing story. And I think, like you said, I was, really into you telling me this. And that's what I feel about people, true crime on podcasts are like the most fascinating to people. I think that's why, like a show like a Forensic Files on what I think their 15th year, it's craziness. And I think most of like Hollywood feature films that you look at, like a show like a Forensic File, which my wife and I watch all the time, everything is based, and you can see that Hollywood screenwriters are watching this stuff because so many of these are feature films because they're so interesting how off, like you said, this guy was a little off. You find that people are just a little off and you go, how can people be like this? I mean, honestly, how can people be like this? And I go all the way back to my being raised with my parents have passed away, but I come from a family of 6. And I think you don't think of it at the time of how lucky you are that you had like a loving family. And it all relates to that because it makes sense that most of the people doing crime had a bad childhood. And it's like, Jesus, I never would think that when I'm growing up and you're like, I just want to get out of here. Why are you yelling at me, Dad? And blah, blah, blah. So you really, I think you come when older you get, obviously, you appreciate life. And like I said, I appreciate growing up in Milwaukee.
I agree. Thankful that I had a normal child. Everyone you have the normal fights and whatever with your brothers, sisters, parents, mom and dad, all that, but yeah, in general, yes, it was a very nice, loving, good bringing up. And so, yeah, you never know. It's like weird. Like, that's why I was so interested in like that, question that I asked earlier is like, because when you're around certain people, you never
Yeah.
know. You never know.
Yeah, and also you asked me before about how you go through something traumatic. I think it's less traumatic for me because I did have family support, and I still have my best buddies from high school, and I think that is when you have people that if you ever get cocky or anything, believe me, they humble you, and that is my base of. You can never be too big. That's that expression. It's like, trust me, you got good friends, they'll put you in your place, and you should be put in your place. So I think the base of my dearest friends are still my dearest friends today. And that's also very life-saving to not see a psychologist or anything.
Sorry to interrupt this amazing conversation with Kato Kaelin, but we have to take a quick break. And we're back with Kato Kaelin, about to dive into the People versus OJ Simpson's mini-series, the actor that portrayed him, and so much more. And we're back. How did it feel when they brought back the People versus OJ, the movie? Not necessarily your feelings on the movie, which I'm interested in, but just all of a sudden it's like, at some point you're like, okay, it's been decades, and you start to feel like this relief that it's never going to go away, but it's like subsiding a bit, right? There's other things. And then all of a sudden Ryan Murphy goes, no, I want to remind everybody that this happened. And then we're going to create, and it's funny because it's like there were 150 some witnesses in the OJ trial. And it's like, I mean, no disrespect to any of them. I'm sure they were great, but I don't know that anyone can name anyone but Kato Kaelin. I mean, it was like, and like you said, it was like, from like January to October, the trial. And it's like 150 some people. And it's like a lot of characters, and like, boom, like you just
kind of puts the show in perspective because there's a lot of embellishing, especially that that the writer it's based off, it's Jeffrey Toobin. So, he's petting cats on Zoom. So I mentioned before that the Daily News New York asked me, they gave me a screener, Jeff, to watch the first one. They said, hey, would you write an article for our newspaper? And I said, oh, yeah, I'll see this. So I saw the screener. I wrote the first article, and they loved it. So it made me feel wonderful. And they said, do another one. Did another one. Next thing you know, they signed me to do all 10 episodes. So, and I knew going in, Billy Magnuson, the actor, he was a great actor. He didn't want to meet, which is fine. I would think as an actor, you want to meet. If you're playing somebody, regardless of anything, I want to meet the person, even though I have my set of how I want to play it.
Right.
But he didn't want to, and I knew that they were going to make me sort of like a Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But then he did an interview for People magazine on some TV show, and the guy was fantastic. Billy Magnuson was like, I didn't want to meet Kato. I heard great things about him. I didn't want to. I had my mindset, so he said everything. But he was so complimentary to me. I said, like, I love this guy. So for that part, I knew they were going to go with the Spicoli dumb Kato, but I was fine with it. And when I wrote about it, at least I had a chance to explain myself. And they put the Kardashians in there a lot because at that time they knew Kardashians, even though they weren't in a lot of the trial, they put it in there because they've got billions of followers, and they're not stupid at a network. It's like, get them in there. So they wrote a lot of stuff. And by episode 3, I said, they put me in situations in the show that I wasn't in. I wasn't at when the SWAT team came. I was somewhere else, but I'm there. In the show, I'm there. And I was like, okay, there's too much Kato for Kato. And I started writing about, once again, it's a TV show. They can embellish. They can do what they want. A lot of it, there were facts, but a lot of it was fiction. And it won 8 Emmys. So credit goes to Ryan Murphy.
It's like Winning Time. There's a lot of them that are saying, oh, this is a horrible Jerry West. It's a horrible. And my friends who are really into sports who know him, when they watch the show, they have an issue with it. But like people like me who watch it, it's like, oh, it's a good show. I could see where they would do that. If you watch the old clips of you during the trial, you got that great hair. You look like the surfer guy from California. So I think they're playing more on the memory of what it was.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, I roll with the punches, and that's it. Let them do that. Billy Magnuson went on to do the last James Bond film, so he was sort of a villain in No Time to Die. I was like, hey, that guy played Kato. It was kind of cool. It's like, hey, man, Billy, it's Kato.
Boom. There you go. So ipso facto. The part I couldn't get over was David Schwimmer being Robert Kardashian. I couldn't wrap my head around Ross Geller being Kim Kardashian's dad.
Ross from Friends.
Yeah. I was like, oh, look, it's Ross from Friends. He's Kim Kardashian.
And Travolta was Shapiro.
Yeah.
I mean, they
hell
just
of a
went,
cast. Hell of a cast.
Yeah, that was Cuba Gooding as OJ. He was okay.
Yeah. Your perspective on it would be 100% different than mine.
Yeah.
It was probably hard. I think I saw a little bit of a clip of Marcia Clark realizing like she thought Sarah Paulson did such a good job that at some point she endeared herself to it a bit, at least.
Oh yeah, they hung out. They've had lunches. They definitely met a few times. I saw that on some. I think it was when Marcia was doing Entertainment Tonight or whatever. They struck up a friendship, which is fine.
So as I was kind of digging into this, everyone met you when you were living on OJ's property in his guest house. But and kind of just prepping to talk with you, I didn't realize you had lived with Nicole Brown.
Yeah.
Prior to that for a whole year or so. And so that was interesting. So you were part of this whole Simpsons ecosystem for quite some time. It was.
Yeah, I saw the lifestyle on both sides. I think that's what it was really interesting to the prosecution and the defense is I saw both sides of relationships. And I saw, and the Kardashian girls were just small girls, and Nicole and the kids, Justin and Sydney, they bought a dog and they said, Mom, we want to name it Kato. And, we had Kato, the Akita. It really was, Nicole just was this loving mom. She went running with her friends, Kris Kardashian in the mornings. I had a casting business with another actor buddy of mine. So it was like everybody was busy and doing their own thing. But at that time she was divorced. But when OJ would come by, I kept wanting them. They started dating again. And I was like, oh, I never saw anything physical fighting. I only saw one time the after effect of a 911 call that I came late to, and OJ was gone already, but he had broken down some doors. And I just remember Nicole and I hammering the door shut again. He broke these French doors that would open up. So that's the only time I didn't see it, but that was part of the trial in the transcripts. And that was it. I always said, like being raised, seeing my parents when they rarely fought, but if they did, they always ended it with a kiss. And I would say to them, why don't you guys just kiss more? And that was it. So I saw both sides. Was
it weird then? How did it affect your friendship with Nicole when you started living with OJ?
Well, Nicole asked me to move into the Bundy house, but the Bundy house was not a guest house. It was inside the house. And I said, no, I didn't feel right about that part of going there. And I was looking for a place to live. And then OJ just said, well, move in with me until you find a place. And that was it. So at first, yeah, she was upset because she thought that I was taking sides. And I honestly wasn't taking sides at all.
How long did you live in OJ's guest house before the murder?
6.5 months, 7 with Nicole.
Oh, wow. So you actually, you were with OJ just before, right? You guys went to McDonald's, right? Side note, I guess.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, the McDonald's story was he came to my guest house and knocked on the door to see if I could break 100. I didn't have it. I said, I got 240s. And I said, will you take it? Take this. And I used to run like the marathons, and I run like 15 miles a day. And I had not eaten. I played basketball. And I just said, I'm starving. Can I go? So I had no idea where we were going and all that. And McDonald's was not the kind of food I would eat. So he drove, and next thing you know, we're at some McDonald's drive-through. So it wasn't a thing where I knew we were going to McDonald's. It was just a place he drove to a drive-through.
I saw, we talked about some of it being, your first trial and like some of the anxiety of like just being on a witness stand. But I saw a clip of Marcia Clark talking to you about that. And it's like, it's amazing to me what lawyers, the questions that they'll ask. They're like, you handed it to. Who did you hand it to? What side was that person on? Even like what driver's side for the drive-through? Okay.
Yes,
did you
she
see
thought
it?
we were at the McDonald's of London.
Yeah.
It was this side.
Why did you go to this McDonald's, not that McDonald's? Did he have I know she was trying to figure out if he had a cut on his hand at that point or not. That's what I think she was trying to get to. But it was just like every minute detail that it's interesting when they try and get to who remembers these things? Who paid?
Yeah.
I mean, we were at McDonald's. What do you want?
And I just remember him just in my mind. I just remember him. I think it was a Big Mac, but he just took maybe 2 bites. It was gone. And he had, the French fries and all that. And I just waited. I didn't want to eat the Bentley or the Rolls Royce, whatever the car was. It was the nice, the Grey Poupon Rolls Royce.
Was OJ did he eat McDonald's a lot? Because the reason I'm asking is apparently when he got out of jail for the stealing that football stuff he stole, his first meal was McDonald's.
That's so bizarre. I didn't know. That's a fun fact. I'll have to look that up. I had no idea. And I know I didn't know his food habits. I rarely even saw him. And it just happened to be that night. I think in hindsight, I'm pretty sure that was to establish an alibi.
So did you not hang out with him a lot? You just happened to hang out with him?
No, yeah, that was rarely because he was at NBC at the time and gone a lot. And I was just the guy in the guest house. It wasn't the main house. So I even thought when I did my, the transcripts, I thought it was sort of unusual that he actually came to my room because it's maybe once he did it before, that's it.
Oh man. So I gotta say for OJ for acting, Naked Gun movies, he was great in that.
He's great. The thing about my wedding, I told you it was at David Zucker's, and people that don't know that David wrote that film and directed Naked Gun. And I had thanked everybody coming to the wedding. I just said, thank you so much, David. Thank you for the use of your house. But more importantly, David, thank you for not inviting Nordberg.
David, right, that's right. David Zucker, The Naked Gun. I love The Naked Gun movie so much. Police Squad that it was based on was one of the best TV shows. There was actually, I read a whole thing on that once that it failed ultimately because it was so intelligent. You literally had to watch it. Like you had to watch it to understand the jokes and what was going on because it was so detailed. Where, most things, hour-long dramas or whatever, you can come in pretty much 40 minutes in and you can figure out what happened.
Right.
But The Naked Gun was the only movie really ever based on a failed TV show.
And now that it's also, it built, like you said, it was successful because it built a cult following with people like yourself and me. And I remember when Police Squad wasn't renewed, it was cut. I was like, are they kidding me? This is brilliant, this show.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah. Anyone who is listening, you should definitely go Google that, find it on YouTube or something. Leslie Nielsen was just a genius at comedy. And I think his early work was all like drama stuff too, right? It's funny how people...
Leslie's also in Airplane. So they had a relationship when Leslie did Airplane. So it was the right pick. They knew to go with Leslie Nielsen. So funny. I became friends with Robert Hayes, a striker in Airplane. So I have all these relationships. And it's so funny, Jeff, how things go full circle. When you're growing up, you go, God, I would like to meet this person one day. And this, I always thought David Zucker. I go, oh my God, he's from Wisconsin. I got to meet him. And it just kind of all happens. It may take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but I just think when things are supposed to happen, they sort of are, once again, stars aligning and it's all timing. It's like, all right, if there's a God or whatever, he's going, now it's your time to meet this person. So
yeah, the universe always has a plan. The universe always has a plan. All right, so that's cool. So all right, so back to the anxiety earlier, right? Let's go back to the anxiety because I had a question, a train of thought that I think I forgot. So one of the things that happened was after the murder, you heard a boom or whatever, right? You heard some stuff, and so then you go outside, kind of walking around, and then you just go back, right? And then later, Mark Furman finds the glove where you were, basically. You ever play out in your head 5 more steps?
All the time. So what happened was, is when the police came to my room, the detectives, I said, maybe this is nothing. One of those things that you always see in a TV show is like, maybe this is nothing. But I said, there's no windows in the room I was in against the wall. It's just a wall. But there's a picture. And I said, my picture moved. And I heard these like this thump that happened that made the picture move. So I said, my God, I think we had an earthquake, but it was behind this wall. So I told all the detectives, Mark Furman, one of them, I was on the phone when it was happening. And the person I was talking to, I asked her, I said, hey, did you just have an earthquake? I think I felt an earthquake. And then she said, no, I didn't feel anything. So then I kept hearing like a buzzing noise. And the buzzing noise had happened to be Alan Park, the limo driver. And it was ringing. I could hear from the other part of this ringing coming because it was quiet in the other house. I'm going, what's going on? And that made me go outside. But in hindsight, it's kind of, spooky, for lack of a better word, of going out there because it was sort of a June gloom in LA. We get this June gloom from the oceans that come in towards Brentwood. And it was just the entire night, though, even before everything that I knew, it just seemed like one of those nights, like it was a night that there would be a werewolf. If you can picture that, that's what it looked like. And the rest is history. So they found that glove.
Right. Yeah, not to put a nightmare in your head, but the way I pictured it was, you go boom, 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 and you're like, oh, because you bumped into OJ a little bit later, but boom, 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 you bump into him right there. Could be a different story plays out.
Because I can't, because it's not connected. But I think the theory still to this day for a lot of people there was an air conditioning unit sticking out that he probably jumped there allegedly over a wall, hit it, and a glove dropped.
Got it. Unless Mark Foreman put it there because he was racist. No, I'm just kidding.
It's Jeff,
allegedly.
I've got the lead detective. Well, there's quite a few lead detectives. I think 4 of them. The lead detective, Tom Lang. I became somewhat of a friend of Tom's, and he also did the Wonderland murder. So he has a history, and I always found it fascinating. After the trial and I had so many interviews with them that obviously it's like talking to you. You kind of feel like you know someone, and so we didn't become friends like let's hang out and have lunch, but you could tell there's a camaraderie. And Tom is going to be my guest on the 1 Degree of Scandalous, and I cannot wait not just talk OJ, just to talk about how they think and the kind of the questioning of what they look for. Like I said, it's fascinating to me of the psychology of a detective and how they deal with crime and crime scenes and nightmares and having a wife, and how do you separate your life, with your family to work, and just the stress. Police work is the number 1 divorce rate, and I'm like, what's it like? So it's interesting. I'm going to find out.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one to listen to. The whole psyche of so many of these professions is so interesting. What makes them do what they do, and and it's so dark and gloomy.
Yeah, and the good news for you and me is the divorce rate for podcasters is less than 1%.
Oh, I did want to ask you one question about landmark libel case. So,
that's one of the things that I cannot discuss. I know you asked me beforehand, but that's anyways. You look great.
You look great. Okay, so you can't talk about this thing. Can I say it and you just not react? Okay.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Well, you were part of a landmark libel lawsuit that then did find eventually that headlines could be considered libel. I thought that was what the interesting thing was, that they had skewed something towards you and you pushed back and they changed the law, which I thought was cool. And we'll leave it at that. All right.
I know for a fact that I can say that in law books that I've gone to different colleges, law students, where I've done speeches, and they bring up, and it's the cool part is that it's in every law book.
That is really cool. It's so I guess we'll have to read about it in law books since you can't talk about it. And then just because everyone will be a bit mad at me if I don't ask, OJ did it or didn't do it?
In my opinion, I've said on many shows, I think OJ's guilty. In my opinion,
right.
The jury found him not guilty. I think Robert Kardashian's, I think that's one of the most iconic things to see his reaction with that reading.
Oh, yeah. When you can pay for millions and millions of dollars for lawyers, I think that's one of the lessons learned from the whole OJ case. Okay.
Say Robert Kardashian or David Schwimmer.
Right, either one. If you can't get him, get Ross. All right, important question is the other huge major pop culture milestone that you were part of, at least in my personal world. You were in the last Sharknado. It's about time.
I call it Sharknado.
My only question is, how did they wait to 6 to get Kato Kaelin as a cameo? It's like they went all cameo heavy on 2 they started, but 3 on. I mean, I was like, boom. So I'm glad you were eventually in it. Was that fun at least? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, no, it was a fun time. And I agree with you. I kept saying to myself, I said, how am I not in one of the Sharknadoes? And then I got the phone call on Sharknado 6. I said, yes. It's an easy shoot for 2 days. You just do your thing. And then you go to the premiere and you're like, my God, I was in there for an eye blink. But at least I can say I was in one of the Sharknadoes because it is sort of iconic.
It is iconic. It seriously is one of my favorite. I love all the Sharknado movies. I was obsessed with them. Yeah. So I was like, anytime I see Sharknado on someone's IMDb, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And then, did you just guest host Talk Soup, or did you do a run on there?
Yeah, I did 2 episodes Talk Soup, but I do know for a fact that supposedly the host that I is up for Greg Kinnear, but still to this day, that's the highest rated episode ever in Talk Soup's history.
Oh, I believe it. I had Hal Sparks on the show. He was a Talk Soup guy for a while. I like Hal. Host of Talk Soup to me was always like the dream job.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a great job. I did when the trial was going on, that one of the first shows that I did. I'm still to this day friends with Bill Maher, but he asked me to do Politically Incorrect, and that was my meeting of Gary Shandling. And Gary didn't want to meet me because he waited for the show because he didn't want to. He told me later, who I had met many times after that event, that he didn't want to like me, and he had to set jokes. But it was to this day one of the best experiences because of still being friends with Bill today, and just that the energy of that whole Politically Correct episode was to me, it was sort of fascinating. And that was in Gary's HBO. We did a documentary, and that opened the show with Judd Apatow's documentary about Gary's life.
I love Gary Shandling. He was one of my favorite comics, and such a loss. I did want to, let me wrap up with, how did you feel about David Spade's portrayal of you on Saturday Night Live?
It's so funny that you said this today. This morning, I did like a workout, and I look at a lot of the podcasts. I look at what's going on. So David Spade and Dana Carvey have a Fly on the Wall podcast, and their guest is Martin Short. And I was going to write in my comments, 3 people all did Kato. They all were Kato impersonators at the time. And in the order, nothing bad with David, was Martin Short nailed it. Dana Carvey and David Spade were a tie. But Martin Short did the best Kato. I thought it was me when I first saw it on his special. But yeah, I know David. He's a great comic. They're all great. We do a podcast in the studio, Dana Carvey's son. So it's pretty exciting that I'm going, oh my God, I've always loved Dana Carvey. And now his son runs the studio that we do our podcast at.
And then we talked earlier about like how People versus OJ sort of had that caricaturization of you. But on that episode of Saturday Night Live, the joke was from Norm Macdonald, Kato spent 4 days on the witness stand this week, making it the longest job he's ever held.
I love it.
But people take from Saturday Night Live, and then that's the opinion they go forward with. There's so much political stuff that just gets fed to you from Saturday Night Live, not just about you, but just anything, and I think they know that. And so I thought, so some of that feeding into it, and then David Spade.
Oh yeah, well, I was the lead joke for many, many months on Letterman and Leno, and then the Norm joke turned out to be Norm wanted to meet, and he and I had golfed probably 50 times together. The late Norm Macdonald, and became friends from golfing and basketball together. What's so funny is talking with you, Jeff, is that you've got me rolling in my mind with all these things that are going like, oh my God, I forgot that and that. And I'm going to bring this up on 1 Degree of Scandalous. All the things you brought up helped me out so much. And can I do a plug, which I hate doing?
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
I would love for everybody to follow me on Instagram. It's Kato_Kaelin. That's KATO_KAELIN. Kato Kaelin. Subscribe if you can. The link to my bio on that for our 1 Degree of Scandalous podcast with Tom Zenner on Apple, Spotify, Podcast One, wherever you guys get your podcast, and subscribe to the YouTube so you can see our pretty faces. The other show is Ice Wars it's prize fighting, MMA fighting on ice, and who will be the next king of the rink. Jeff, did I nail it or what?
You nailed it. You think you did that for a living or something. But Kato, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciated you hanging out with me. I'm glad we finally were able to connect and have this conversation.
Completely. I really am appreciative that you did. I wasn't putting you off, and I can tell you don't think I did, but I wanted you to know I didn't. I wasn't, and I'm so glad I did this. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody listening to Jeff's podcast. He is the best. You rule, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, let me hit stop.
Recording stop.
All right, now you can tell me the real stuff. Oh no, it cut off, and Kato revealed so much amazing stuff about the trial. Oh, that was off the record, but I thought anyway. All right, well maybe we'll recover it. We'll do a part 2. I keyed. How amazing was Kato Kaelin? After the interview, he moved into my guest house. He's been here ever since. He's a delightful guest. Let me say that right off the bat. I kid. All right. Well, Kato was awesome. Check out Ice Wars. Check out 1 Degree of Scandalous, his podcast. Go on YouTube. Deep dive into the OJ Simpson murder trial. Get your fix of Kato Kaelin. It's all out there. All right. Well, with the interview over, that can only mean one thing. That's right. It's time for another trending hashtag from the family of hashtags at Hashtag Roundup. Download the free, always free Hashtag Roundup app at the Google Play Store or iTunes App Store. Tweet along with us, and one day one of your tweets may show up on a future episode of Classic Conversations. fame, and fortune await you. Today's hashtag comes to us from Roly Poly Tags, a weekly game on hashtag Roundup. Inspired, of course, by Kato Kaelin's podcast, comes the hashtag how I ended up on a true crime podcast. People went to Twitter to share how they ended up on a true crime podcast, and hilarity ensued. All right, let's read some hashtag how I ended up on a true crime podcast tweets. Ripping off the mattress tag. Ooh, that'll get you on a true crime podcast. I told my mom I wasn't going to do the dishes. Disrespect can lead nowhere good. I never returned my last rental to Blockbuster. Ooh, that's a rough one. Hashtag how I ended up on a true crime podcast. Sat too close to a loud chewer. I can only imagine what happened next. I bumped into Steve Martin Short, and Selena Gomez in the elevator of the Arconia. That is definitely one way to end up on a true crime podcast. I drank a fifth instead of pleading the fifth. That can lead nowhere good. I turned right at Albuquerque. Ooh, you should have turned left. I walked into the wrong room, but there were snacks. I would have stayed too. If there's snacks, you got to stay. It's rude not to. My husband told me to calm down. Oh, I bet you ended up on more than one true crime podcast after that happened. I falsely claimed I could fold a fitted sheet. First of all, who would ever believe you? And then our final, how I ended up on a true crime podcast tweet, the glove fit. Oh, there we go. All right, you knew one of those was coming up, right? Those tweets are all retweeted at Jeff Dwoskin Show on Twitter. Go show them some love. If you've got your own, add your own. Tweet it. Tag us at Jeff Dwoskin Show. I'll show you some Twitter love. In the meantime, though, with the hashtag over and the interview over, that can only mean one thing. That's right. Episode 158 has come to an end. I want to thank my special guest, Kato Kaelin. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.